Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. He's Mike Irwin. I'm Courtney Mims. Mike, you ready to get into the questions this week?
Of course.
As always, you're always ready, and we're back to doing it on a Monday, so that feels good as well. Razor Alex 88 wants to know, is it justifiable to be upset about being swept by Georgia? Losing one, fine. Losing two and the series, not ideal. Losing all three, and I might add in embarrassing fashion. Just plain maddening, considering Georgia is not even in the top 3 or 4 of the SEC East.
Okay, I really don't know where to start here, so I'm going to start with Georgia and this whole business of last place in the SEC East when the series started. We've said this over and over again. There aren't any bad teams in the SEC this year. Anybody can beat anybody, and that's a departure because in the years past there have been some teams that were pitiful. They're not one of them. They had gotten swept by some teams in the East, but they had also won a series against Kentucky, and Kentucky's pretty good. They'd been on a little bit of a roll. Their batting average had gone up. They really started to hit home runs going into that series. Their pitching hasn't been great, but it was getting better. And here comes Arkansas. Now, let's go look at Tennessee. Tennessee gets swept by Arkansas, then comes back and plays a midweek game against Tennessee. Is Tennessee Tech a real team? Is that a real school?
Yes, I believe it is,
That sounds like
Mike.
something you make up.
It does, right?
You write
Tennessee
a book,
Tech.
Tennessee Tech.
It is a real school, apparently.
So they play Tennessee Tech in a midweek game and get beat 12-5. So now they're in a total downer. Just got swept by Arkansas, not having a good year anyway, and now they've lost a midweek game. And they sweep Vanderbilt, the best team in the East. How does that happen?
It's baseball.
It's baseball. It's crazy. It occurs to me that baseball, a lot of it is about how do you handle success and what do you do when you have failure? Because let's start with the failure. Here's Tennessee with this horrible failure going on. They're getting swept. They're not having a good year. Feeling sorry for them. We mentioned it last week, felt sorry for Vitello. And then they come back and play this midweek game and they're pitiful, and you think, oh man, these guys are horrible. And then they do what they did. So they used that embarrassment, that downer, to kind of surprise Vanderbilt, because I'm sure Vanderbilt was thinking, oh man, we take care of these guys.
We're going to do it, yeah.
And these guys are no problem. Now let's look at Arkansas. You and me and Courtney sat here, and I was very uncomfortable doing this, talking about how great Arkansas was. Now,
Oh, you mean Alyssa as well?
Huh?
Alyssa, you said you, me, and Courtney. I'm Courtney.
Yeah, two Courtneys.
Two Courtneys, that's
Alyssa
fine.
is really Courtney.
It's
so
really
Courtney
Courtney,
1 and 2. So I was uncomfortable with that because what we ended up saying is when you look at them statistically, there's nothing unusual about them. It's a very average baseball team. They just were finding ways to win. And all of a sudden, you can find ways not to win.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what happened.
And I don't know that they went down there and went, oh, man, we can beat these guys. Georgia's terrible. This is the first place team in the West against the last place team in the East. This will be easy. I don't think they did that. But if they even thought about it in the back of their heads, they were absolutely wrong. Now, a lot of things went right in that series, little bitty things that Peyton Stovall hits a ball down the line, it's like that far foul, and then he hits one on the other line, it's that far foul. You know, little things like that. Diggs almost hit a home run and got robbed in Game 3. It might have made a difference. You don't know. There were a lot of little things like that. It was one of those things, and I've seen this happen to Arkansas. Really, the Tennessee series was like that. Everything went right for Arkansas. Everything went wrong for Tennessee. Well, you got payback on this because everything went right for Georgia. Now let's see what happens to Georgia.
Yeah.
Will they handle success, or will they end up going, meh?
Yeah.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Now, here's the thing. We're all sitting here last week looking at the fact that these projections, they're always doing projections on NCAA tournament. They had Arkansas projected as a national 5 seed last week. DVH after that game, here's what he said. I don't know how many people paid attention to this, but he said, talking about the injuries, he said, when we get to the end of the year, we're just hoping to get a regional bid. We're hoping to get enough guys back and put it together to get a regional bid. So you go from, and he wasn't talking about a national 5 seed, but people were. National 5 seed, you know, you're going to be a regional. If you win, you're going to host a super regional. Mm-hmm. Now you could go anywhere like they did last year. So why would he say something like that? Does he suddenly realize that this team is really not all that good anyway, and now they've lost all these players, and it's going to be a while before they get them back? And so now he's really being honest and saying we're going to be lucky just to make a bid. Well, they'd have to almost collapse to do that. But I guess it could happen. There's something else at work in his mentality, I think, and that is the knowledge that historically Arkansas has gone on the road in the NCAA tournament many times and made it to Omaha. You almost get the impression Dave Van Horn would rather do what he did last year, which no one gave him. They were on a real downer. They hadn't played well at the end of the season, didn't do well in the conference tournament, so now you're going to Stillwater. But what happens when you go on the road? You don't have all these fans telling you how great you are. You can isolate your team. You don't expose them to a lot of nonsense. I think he kind of likes that. So maybe it's not just that he's projecting it, maybe he wants it to happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe he would rather not go through, because I'm telling you, if you're him, hosting a regional is a hassle.
It is.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on. He doesn't have to run the whole thing, but there's a lot of stuff he has to do to host a regional, host a super regional. It's a lot easier just to go to somebody else's plate, let them handle all of it, and you're just coming in there and playing baseball. Yeah. So maybe that's what he's talking about. I personally think that they're going to get a regional, probably a super regional. Some of it depends on these injuries and how long this takes place. Like how long is Josie and Tavian Josenberger out? How long is he out?
Your guess is as best as mine.
DVH says it's a hamstring injury from my experience. Those usually take a while, so I'm going to say it'll take a while. But what is a while? Is it 3 games? Is it 8 games? Is it 10 games? We don't know. But that's going to be a big, big problem for them. And then how long till your catcher comes back? Is he back this weekend? That would help.
Yeah.
Do they get
Jared Wagner?
Yeah, well, we know Wagner's late in the season, so he's still going to be out for a while. But, you know, are you going to get your closer back after all this time? We thought he was coming back last week. And then, you know, DVH kind of held off, said we're going to wait one more week. If you're a fan, you're going to be upset by this, but you've got to constantly tell yourself that baseball is different. And all these fans that are outraged at being swept, other teams get swept all the time. Arkansas almost never gets swept. The amount of time that took place between the last time they were swept and this time, I think almost every other team in the SEC had been swept, some of them multiple times. So it's not the end of the world. What is much more concerning is not that this happened. It's that with the injuries, things could really be about to go on a downer. And we're not going to know that till A&M comes to town. A&M is a team that's sitting there 2 games behind Arkansas in the West. So if they swept Arkansas, poof, they suddenly move up to second. And they're going to be motivated to do that. So what happens here? You know, do these injuries continue to cause problems? Does Gage Wood, does he bounce back? Do these freshman pitchers pitch better? What's going on with the 2 starters? They suddenly seem to be struggling a little bit. So is Hunter Holland going to have a good Friday game? What about Will McIntyre? You know, what's he going to do? So you got all these question marks, and all you can do with this baseball team is just wait and see.
Yeah, and we have some questions about some of those guys that you just mentioned, Mike, so we're going to keep rolling with the baseball questions here. Lonnie Romans on Facebook says, what is going on with Peyton Stovall? His batting average has dropped to .260. He was 1-13 against Georgia. This guy turned down big money to play college baseball. Was he overrated coming out of high school?
Well, you wouldn't convince anybody he was overrated if you looked at his performance in the postseason last year. He did admit and talked a lot about how in the regular season he was kind of out of whack, but he found it in the postseason. And he hasn't struggled this year the way he did last year. but he's in a little bit of a slump right now. If you go back and look, and I looked at all of his at-bats. He wasn't striking out. He wasn't standing there looking at the ball. He was hitting the baseball. Baseball is like this. It's going right to people. He's hitting fly balls to where people are. You know, he's hitting ground balls to where people are. I mentioned the 2 shots down the line, one to left field, one to right field, just that far. So I think he'll probably break out of this. Maybe A&M would be a good time for him to do that, but he's one of the guys that needs to get back on track. I think you got 4 guys batting over 300 up there helping him. But, you know, you just, at some point, these injuries, you just have to accept the fact that you can't play as well with these guys hurt as you would if they were in the lineup.
Yeah.
It's going to affect the team.
It really is. Eddie Lynn on Facebook says, I'm tired of hearing about the injured pitchers. I mean, yeah, I think we all are. How about the ones who have gone backwards this season, like Will McIntyre? He was solid last year. This season, he's all over the map. Great one week, bad the next. Mike, your take?
Yeah, it's an excellent point because this isn't an injury situation. These are 3 guys they really counted on this year, and we're going to take a look at some graphics on that, and it's pretty telling. McIntyre, Zach Morris, and Austin Ledbetter have seen their ERAs go way up this season. McIntyre is up to 5.88 after a 2.59 last season. Morris has gone from a 2.31 to almost 8.
Wow.
Ledbetter was at 2.84 last season. Right now he's at 7.17. Morris and Ledbetter, they're not even hardly pitching these days, just a little bit. But McIntyre, he's your game 2 starter. And his big issue is the home runs. He gave up 4 home runs last year.
Yeah.
We're not anywhere close to the season being over this year, and he's given up, look at that, 15.
Oh,
that's what's got his ERA up, is he's giving up these home runs. And DVH talked about him and said, I've been talking about how you can watch him, and when he's up in the zone, that's when they're going to tattoo him. But DVH said there's another factor there. He can get away with that if his fastball is 92, 93. When it drops down to 88, that's when they hit him. And that's what was going on this weekend. So I don't know if he's got a little arm weariness or what, but that's another guy that you got to count on, and we don't know what's going to happen. So, and the other 2, you might as well just not talk about them because they're virtually not playing. I mean, they might be in relief for an inning here and there, midweek or whatever. DVH is pretty much going with freshmen instead of those 2 guys, and who knows what's going on with them. I'd like to talk to them and find out.
Me too. I would like to know what's going on in their heads about all of that. Little Joe asks, how would you grade the overall spring camp this year, especially considering all the new faces?
Well, it shows that football's over, and we covered this last week, but we get another question, so I did it last week, so I'd turn around and do the same thing this week. You start with the quarterbacks. I thought KJ was okay. He didn't just blow me away in that spring game. He completed 50% of his passes, threw 1 long bomb. He's dealing with a lot of stuff, and that's what I was looking at was the offense is different. We know, for instance, that Dan Enos has said we want you to become more of a passer this year, less of a runner. We don't want you to just take off. And he's lost weight.
Yeah.
You know, last year he was this bulked up guy that would just knock people around, and I think
battering ram.
They want him to be a little more of a speed guy when he does break through. But we saw that drill where Enos was talking to him about throwing more with your body and less with your arm, getting your whole body into it.
Yeah.
So I was looking for those things, and it's all good, but when you have a major change like that, when you've worked with one coordinator with one offense and you've got a major change like that, I'm just telling you, I'm going to wait till the season starts. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, KJ's great. This is all great. This is awesome. I have to see this guy in this offense with this new coordinator and see how that works before I'm willing to sit here and tell you, yeah, this is going to be all fine. It's great. It's wonderful to have a new offensive coordinator. Kendall Briles was a dodo, and we're glad he's gone. I mean, everybody's going to be – I'm just not going to say that because you have to see it. So, but I will say about the quarterbacks, they're so much better in a backup situation now. Malik Hornsby that was a disaster from his freshman year on. They thought he was going to be the next guy, and he never was. and he got them beat.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't count on him when he had to play.
And he was the guy who looked good in spring last year, too.
And Sam Pittman made the statement, I made a mistake I'm not going to judge people on the spring anymore.
Yes.
It's what I'm saying. You have to look at them in the fall when they're actually being tackled before you can evaluate people.
I agree.
So I like those two backup quarterbacks, Criswell and Malik Singletary. Is that
Singletary, yeah.
Those two guys.
Or Malachi, sorry.
Malik.
Malachi. I'm like, what am I saying?
Malachi Singleton. He actually, the freshman, looked really good throwing the ball. He surprised me. I didn't think he was. I thought he was more of he's a run-pass quarterback, but he's really more run. Because when I looked at his highlights, that's what it looked like to me. He's got an arm. He can throw the ball. He's not 6'5" or anything like that, but he maneuvers around, gets a clear path. I was impressed with him throwing the ball. I think he's going to play some this fall, and I definitely think Criswell, they'll bring him in some just to rest Jefferson. Play him fewer reps with the idea that he won't get hurt as much. Greater chance of getting hurt.
Yeah.
So I like the quarterback situation. Running backs, what are you going to say about those? Those guys are good. But you really, how do you evaluate the running game in the spring when you don't tackle? How?
You can't really.
You can't. So I'm going to sit here
They
and
all
think
look
the
good.
running backs were awesome. Well, really?
Well, they all look good, so.
We just know they've been good, and so now there's a new offense, and once again, how will it affect them? Well, we know that on these play-action passes with KJ taking the ball under center, there's a mesh that has to take place. We didn't see a lot of that, so that's something else we'll be looking for this fall. But it's hard for me to evaluate the running backs. They just looked okay to me. Defense, D-ends, there was a major difference there. Real heavy pass rush. It disrupted all of those quarterbacks, but KJ in particular, he had the ones going at him. And that was partially the reason for his 50% completion average in that game, because they were coming on almost every play. That's going to make him better, by the way, just simulating an actual SEC defense that's good. I think the D-ends are better. We won't know about the D-line until they tackle. You can't evaluate those guys right now, I don't think, and they're not having to make tackles.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's different when they just touch you.
Linebackers, you can tell a little bit because of the way they maneuver and the position they get themselves in. But you got one guy that played some at linebacker last year, and other than that, everybody's new. Now they're talented, everybody's talking them up, but we got to wait and see. So there's a question mark there. Secondary, just the sheer numbers of good players, that tells me they're going to be better there. Plus, I like the new defensive coordinator, and I like the coaches back there. I think you're going to see a major difference, I think, in the secondary. So that's my overall evaluation. Overall, it was good.
What about the receiving corps? You like the receiving, no?
Once again,
no.
What do you see?
Yeah.
Okay, I saw Satanga.
Yeah,
Satania. Who else? Armstrong, the transfer. Tesla. They look good, but they didn't catch many passes.
No, they didn't.
So some of that was, again, the disruption of the quarterbacks, but it just didn't get a good feel for the receiving corps. So we'll wait and see. I like Mbake.
Yeah, you
or
said
Bakke,
that. Yeah,
not
Bakke.
Mbake.
Sam Bakke, yeah.
I like him. I liked him last year, and they moved him over to defense. I think he's a diamond in the rough over there. He may have a really good year. We'll see.
I would like that. That'd be a pretty good prediction early on, I would say.
But we got time to. We got a lot of baseball to play in the summer, and I'm not going to get in a hurry for football to get here.
I feel you on that. We got to deal with baseball and softball, right?
Football season in this room is hell on wheels for us. You know it is.
It really is.
So we're not exactly looking. We'll just wait till it happens.
We'll wait till
it's like
fall
somebody
camp.
telling you you're going to have to run a marathon, and you're like, okay, when is that? In about 4 months. Okay.
We got time. We got time to train.
We'll worry about that when it happens.
And there's also some new guys coming in that we'll talk about in the questions as well. Yep. I believe you have a question about some of the portal pickups. S. Giles says the internet isn't always a bad thing. I think those people put so much pressure on Briles and Odom that they wanted out. Now look, recruiting is going through the roof, and there's a whole new energy from the staff. Pittman should thank those fans. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a little much because, first of all, I don't think either one of those guys left because of complaints on the internet. The complaints were there, but I don't think that's why they left. We'll briefly go over this again. Odom wanted a head coaching job, and that Vegas job to me is a diamond in the rough job. They got a new stadium there. That was always the problem there, was that dopey place where they played the Vegas Bowl.
Yeah.
Arkansas played there in 2000. But now they've got a new facility there. It's a pro stadium, right?
It's nice.
It's really nice.
It's real nice.
And I got to believe it can't be too hard to recruit to Vegas, right?
Well, he was recruiting people. I was watching because it comes up in my feed because of Barry Odom. It comes up. He looks like he's recruiting really well there. So
well, I mean, I couldn't think that it would be hard to recruit kids to come to live in Vegas.
Yeah,
just
enjoy Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, what a place to live.
Yeah.
So I think there was a reason why he left. Briles, again, he had an aggressive agent. I think he wanted to leave for a head coaching job. He got mentioned and it got out on the Mississippi State thing, and Sam Pittman was very annoyed by that because they were in the middle of recruiting. He said, "Look, I already had a guy coming in because I thought you were taking the job. So if you do this again, you pretty much better be gone because I'm bringing in the next guy if this comes up again." And then it did. So I'm not saying that Briles wouldn't have left anyway, but if you think about it, would you want to go to TCU the year after they went to the championship series and do what they did?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be.
The year after
though.
That's a once in a lifetime thing for TCU. What are you going to do to? Now here's Kendall Briles has to come in and follow up.
On that.
So that's kind of like you don't want to do that.
Yeah, I get that.
So, but yet it's close to where he grew up. So I can understand why he left or whatever. The bottom line is they didn't leave because they were told to leave. And what's interesting to me is Sam Pittman wouldn't have made them leave, but he ended up better off. Now, what does that mean? Does this mean that he's only better off because doesn't have the gumption to say, "Get out of here, I can do a better job"? I don't know. I look at it as they left, and then those same people that she's saying were so great were all over him during that job hiring process. Keep in mind, he's trying to recruit, and everyone's saying, "Hey, you're not looking at the right guy. He's over here. What are you doing in that town? Oh, there's this guy where you need to do that." He was getting heavily criticized, and all of a sudden when it started falling into place and the coaches that he ended up hiring, everybody was like, "Whoa, okay." And then ever since that's happened, it's gotten better and better, especially with the recruiting. So he wouldn't have run them off, but he used that as an opportunity to get this team, I think, a lot better.
Yeah.
And he answered a lot of questions about himself, I think, as the head coach.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people mad at him after that, the way the season went. And now I think there's an energy and an excitement going into next year. Of course, when you get there, you got to win too, but things are looking a lot better than they did last December. I will tell you that.
Yeah, when I've seen all of the interviews that we've done with the guys that Pittman has been bringing in, they all say we wanted to come here because A, the coaching staff,
right,
and B, because we think they're building something big here. And that can only be, I mean, you got to tip your hat to Sam Pittman on bringing in those guys.
I don't give those internet fans credit for that. I think it just happened.
I think it was almost a fortuitous thing. It almost, everything just kind of lined into place.
He wasn't going to fire them, but they left, and he ended up better off because of it.
There you go. Sometimes those things just happen. Hog Redneck says, last week you said you were really high on Landon Rogers as a receiver. This week, he hit the portal. What happened?
Well, I should have talked to Otis because Otis told me yesterday that he had gotten some advance word that Landon was probably going to do this. He did say he left on his own. I think the general feeling is he felt like he was not going to be in the rotation. What I talked about last week was a 5-man rotation, and he'd be part of it. Maybe it's just going to be a 4-man rotation. I don't know. Apparently, he felt like he was not. Here's the thing: Sam Pittman, when they recruited him, was really high on him. He's athletic. He can do a lot of different things. He came in as a quarterback. They quickly said, he's a tight end, a big tight. We're going to put weight on him. He's going to be a tight end. No, he's going to be a receiver. When I saw him in practices going up all the way back to last year, I was impressed with the guy. but for whatever reason, he got lost in the shuffle. I wish him a lot of luck somewhere else. I hope he's very successful where he ends up going, because I think the kid is talented.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. Hud Wyndham says, I see where Pitt is bringing in another tight end out of the portal. I was starting to get worried. We have some talent there, but very little experience.
Yeah, Haas and Shamar Easter,
yeah, Shamar Easter, yeah.
Those two guys, 4 stars, really talented guys. At one point, it looked like they were going to lose both of them with that coaching change, with the offensive coordinator leaving, and also you had your tight ends coach leave and go to South Carolina, and it looked like they were going to lose both of those guys, and then they got them, so everybody was really happy, but they're still freshmen. And this is what we learned with the basketball team. It doesn't matter how good you are in terms of high school and star numbers and all that. If you come in and they're really heavily counting on you as a freshman to do certain things, it's not necessarily a good thing. So this kid that they're bringing in he's not exactly an old guy. He's a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah.
So he's a third-year player. But he's been there. He's done that. He had almost 500 yards and catches last year, caught 5 touchdown passes. And if you check out his background, he's a very athletic kid.
Yeah.
He's a multi-sport athlete in high school. Probably could have done better than North Texas State. That's just where he decided he wanted to go. But now he's decided, hey, Arkansas's got this tight ends coach that sends people to the NFL. I want to go to the NFL, so I'm going. He was considered one of the top guys in the portal. And apparently once Arkansas said, we want you, he just kind of shut everybody else out. How impressive is this? Guess who wanted him?
Who?
Dion. Is Dion
wanted him?
Dion losing very many recruits?
Wow.
Well, he lost this one.
Wow.
So that's how impressed he was with the tight ends coach here, and with the opportunity to come here and kind of be the leader in the room, the older guy in the room. So I think it's a win-win. There were some complaints. Somebody on the internet was going, he needs to put on some weight.
Oh, I saw that. Somebody said, yeah, he needs to put on some weight. I'm like, do you guys understand that once they get here, they will do that?
He'll put on some weight, but we don't want him 280 either.
No.
He's not coming in as a blocker. He's coming in to catch passes.
But there's also a difference between, hopefully there's not a lot of North Texas fans watching this, but there's a difference between our strength and conditioning program and theirs. So he's got to put on the weight. But Varkey's Gums, he is very talented, Mike. I was watching some of his highlights. He's gonna be good.
I think it's a really good pickup.
I do too. Mousetown asked, do you think that Muss is waiting to see if Devo and Walsh come back, or is he already working behind the scenes to replace them? I can't see him sitting around until the end of May to see what these guys are doing.
Yeah, a lot of fans are confused about how this works. Here's what I'm told. That Musselman would take both of them if both of them decided after testing the NBA waters that they wanted to come back. He would take both of them back. They're good enough that he would bring. He's not just shuffling them out the door. He would take them back. Now, apparently they don't know yet what they're going to do. You have 4 transfer portal guys that have committed. But fans need to understand that doesn't mean they're signed, because it's different with portal guys. You sign a grant and aid agreement, which gives you your scholarship money and then allows you to enroll. That won't happen until the first part of next month.
Right.
But that's still about 2.5 weeks ahead of the portal or the NBA deadline to withdraw. So what happens if all 4 of these guys get into school, and then those 2 guys say they want to come back? Nobody will answer that question. I started asking. You start asking yourself, well, it's not going to be Tevin Brazil, right?
No, it won't be Tevin Brazil.
What about Jalen Graham? We were all confused about that. I don't know. Somebody said to me when I was asking about this, they said, well, the problem with any of those big guys leaving, including Mekhi Mitchell, is that they need big guys.
Yeah.
And
Mekhi hasn't said anything yet.
He hasn't. And yet everyone keeps thinking they were going to bring in a true center, and they haven't done that. So if they don't, they need him.
Yeah.
So the guy I was talking to said he didn't think it would be that. What does that leave? Nobody's telling me who would leave. But the answer is obvious, right? It would have to be the freshmen.
Yeah.
The two guys who said we're coming back. And Darian Ford, we see him on the videos on Twitter every day, dribbling, shooting,
he was
doing all
working
this
so
stuff.
hard. He
and
loves
it's like,
Arkansas.
It's like he's saying, hey, I'm going to be good next year. Hey, don't go to sleep on me. So you're almost rooting for him, right?
Yeah.
You're saying, don't come back, guys, because if you do, he may have to leave. We don't want that to happen. So
No,
I don't know. The bottom line is nobody seems to be willing to say if both of those guys came back and you have all four of these guys get into school, they're academically eligible, they're enrolled, what would you do? They won't. Nobody will tell me what would happen.
Logically, there's not enough spots. Logically.
So somebody has to go, but nobody wants to talk about who that would be.
I think we'll come to that bridge when we get there, right, Mike?
I had somebody tell me he thinks they're both gone, and then somebody else told me they think Devo's coming back, but Walsh is gone, so it just goes around and around.
I've heard that Devo and Walsh might be gone, so we've heard all of that.
Too.
We've heard all of it. The Hawk Hawkins says in relation to this question, with all these portal guys coming in, do you really think Ford and Pinion will get to play next season? I'm worried that recruiting is turning into a one and done plus transfers, freshmen that will stick around and don't develop.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern, but I would trust Musselman on this because there's already evidence that he sees what happened here. I mean, that was kind of a as long as I've covered this program, I've never seen 3 McDonald's All-Americans in one class like that.
Yeah.
And they turned out, I think, all 3 are going to be one and dones. We always, before you've had one and done, then you had a one and done. Now what are you going to have? You're going to have 3 and one, and everyone thought this is great. Well, it's not great, is it? Because they don't develop.
No.
So moving forward, I think Musselman will do what he did this year. Those 2 guys, he got 2 5-stars, but I've not heard anybody talk about them being one and dones, right? I think they'll both be back.
Oh, okay.
After next year.
Bayfall and Lady
Yeah, because I don't think both of them are going. I don't think they're going to be under this. There won't be the same kind of pressure to play them in key situations, because you brought in all these transfer portal people. You don't have to play them like you had to play Walsh.
No.
You had to do that. So you can just play them, and if they play well, great. You're doing great. If they don't, hey, go sit on the bench. We'll bring you back in later. There's less pressure on them. And then maybe they come back for a second year. Who knows, maybe even a third year. So I do think there's signs of what you're talking about, of getting back to where you at least have 2 or 3 players that you're bringing through your system, guys like Devo who are going to stick around. Because we saw this past year, you need those guys.
Yeah, you definitely do. So Darian Ford, though, and Joseph Pinion, if they do stay, do you think they'll play?
I think they'll play more than they did. It's up to them.
Okay.
I mean, you see with Ford what he's trying to do. He's saying, "Look, I'm 6'4". I'm big. I'm 220 pounds. I'm physical. I can go up and dunk it. I'm quick." He's making a case for himself, but that's what you have to do. Both of them are going to have. Nobody's going to hand it to him.
No.
And I don't know what will happen there, but you'd like to see it. That's all I can say. You'd like to see them earn playing time.
Well, they seriously have a fan base here because, you know, Darian Ford, when he announced, you go through the comments, every Arkansas fans are all happy. Joseph Pinion, a lot of Arkansas fans happy to see him back.
Absolutely.
So you kind of want to root for these guys, you know. Lanny wants to know, who is the toughest Razorback to interview any sport? I'm excited to know this one, Mike.
First of all, if you go back far enough, this is the big difference in what we do today, what you do, and what I had to do 30-something years ago,
It's changed a
40-something
lot.
years ago. Well, when I first started, a lot of guys that came to college had never done a television interview before. They were fine with the newspaper guys. I was so frustrated my first few years here because I would stand there and watch them do a newspaper interview. And then I would say, okay, now, and I don't want to be on TV. And you wouldn't believe the number of guys that didn't know, they would freeze up.
Wow.
It's crazy now because of the internet. Everybody's a star. Everybody's been interviewed. Everybody knows how to talk. There were a lot of guys that were just extremely uncomfortable being on television and would tell you, and I don't want to do it. Nolan Richardson, I won't say who the guy was one time, but Nolan came to me and he said, if you really want me to make him do the interview, I will. It's up to you. And I said, no, he doesn't have to do that. And I developed kind of an attitude in those days of, if somebody was really uncomfortable being on TV, they thought they would look stupid, wouldn't say the right things or whatever, I would just say, look, if I need to do a story on them, I will interview somebody about them, the coach, their teammate.
Gotcha.
So I sort of had to adjust like that. Now, who would the guy be? Well, there's several that were difficult, but one of them was difficult for a different reason, and that was Steve Little, and he was the most difficult one. Little was a great player, and he could have easily done a TV interview. How do I explain Steve Little? He was a high school quarterback and a really good one, who was very frustrated by the fact that he wanted to be a quarterback at Arkansas, and they wouldn't let him because he was too important as a kicker. They were afraid to get him hurt, and then all of a sudden you don't have your kicker. So they wouldn't let him come in and be the backup, or if the quarterback got injured, he had no shot at being the guy that comes in, and he was frustrated by that. And I think he honestly felt like the whole kicking thing was a lot of baloney. You know, you get attention from doing that, but he just, I don't know. Whenever I tried to interview him about kicking, he acted like, what are you talking to me about kicking for? You know, why? Why do you even care about this?
Well, you're the kicker, aren't you?
He wasn't into it. And you just got the impression, I just stopped interviewing him after a while because I knew he didn't want to do it. I knew he didn't want to talk about kicking. He just wanted to be Steve Little, and he was just sitting there as game. Will somebody give me a chance to be a quarterback? I always thought he was frustrated by that. So I think he was the toughest, but there were a bunch of them like that. That all started changing in the 80s. I started noticing fewer and fewer players. Ron Brewer Sr., Ronnie Brewer's dad, was on the first team that I covered. He would do the interviews, but he wasn't good at it. He just had a hard time verbalizing what he wanted to say. He went off to the NBA, and I didn't see him for several years. And he came back here, and I had to interview him because he was given a camp. I couldn't believe the difference.
Yeah. Just
going off and being around all those other NBA players and having to be around the national media, he just got good at it. He's a kid from Northside, from Fort Smith, you know. He had never been on television before, and so if you've never done something before, it's tough for you.
Yeah. You know what they do at some other schools? Because they had me do this when I was working in the Panhandle.
I know what you're going to say.
You know exactly what I'm going to say. They brought us into the teams, like media members, and they would do a media class, like how do you do an interview? And it was very cool. A lot of the players really enjoyed it and was really like, thank you for actually showing me how to do this. It was really cool. It was,
Eddie Sutton's wife, Patsy, started doing that.
No way.
Along about 1980. She would bring them over, and they had a camera, and
love
she would interview them.
That's awesome.
And sort of get them used to it. And that's when that all started to change, really. It just became less and less. Today, the whole question is ridiculous because who's hard to interview? Everybody wants to be on.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wants to be a star. Everybody wants you to interview them. But back in the old days, it was tough sometimes to get somebody to, again, you know how frustrating it is to stand there and watch a guy do 2 newspaper interviews. Now it's your turn. He goes, no, I'm not doing TV. You're like, what? I got a story to do.
I got to do a story as well. I think Danielle Musselman did a class this year for the basketball team, which I thought was really cool. She should do that for all the sports teams. She should that would be great. All right, and our final question, Mike, is going to be a fun one, right? Alice Mango, I love that name, on Facebook says, you and Courtney seem to have good chemistry doing Ask Mike. Is that real? Or is it one of those fake it for the camera deals?
I don't know. Is it fake?
Yeah, it's Mike, of course. When we get off, I'm like, oh,
well, I will
Mike.
say this. You're extremely annoying because you come over to my computer, stand over my shoulder, and make sure that every little, did you check this? Did you do that?
I'm a
Have you put a period at the end of that sentence?
I'm a details person.
And so I finally had to tell you one day, like I was doing this about 25 years before you were born. Go sit down.
I'm glad you put me in your place. Somebody on the YouTube once said, oh, I love Courtney and Mike. Oh, I enjoy watching them. And somebody said, the reply to that was, yeah, it's really fake. I don't think they like each other. And I said, we like each other.
I will say this. You've got a sense of humor because if you didn't, I wouldn't want to be around you because
Yes.
I really give it to people.
do.
I let people have it, and it's all in fun, and as long as you take it, then it's okay.
Yeah, you make fun of me on this show all the time.
I do.
So it's great.
There's one basic issue here, though, we have to talk about.
Okay, what's the basic issue?
And that is that I'm Scottish, and you're half British.
I knew you were going
And
to
if
say
you watch
this.
the movie Braveheart, Mel Gibson, you know that the Brits were really mean to my ancestors, and I don't like them. Now, it wasn't all British. It was the kings and the queens and those people, the royals.
The royalty.
And so we Scottish don't like the British royalty.
Yeah.
I don't like Prince Charles. He needs to go be in a can somewhere. Prince Charles in a can.
That's
Stay
great.
in the can.
That's great.
But you told me that your mother, who's British, does not like the royals.
Yeah, my family doesn't really like the royals. So
If it were up to me, if somebody said, all right, you are the entire parliament for a day,
yeah,
do anything you want, I would take all of the money that goes into the British royals, take
Yeah.
all their money, it's billions, right?
yeah, yes,
Billions. I
Billions.
would take it away from them, put it in some place in the government,
Okay.
and other people could decide what to do with it. Take
Okay.
it away from them and say, go get a job.
But what job were they going to do?
I
They're
don't know.
royals.
It doesn't matter. They would have to go. It would suddenly be reality, right? Can you
Yeah.
imagine Charles would go out, well, he'd go out and do climate change stuff, right?
I guess. I mean, or they might join the military. They might do something in the military.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they can do
military.
that. But
Yeah.
but Charles is not a military guy. He's more of a climate change guy. He'd be out trying to save the planet. Some company
I don't
would
know.
hire.
What would Camilla do? I'm thinking about all of these jobs now that the royals would do.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what she would do, but yeah.
So if you were really high on the royal family, we would have a real issue.
We would, but I'm not. So
Then you're not.
we're cool, right, Mike?
So we're okay.
So we're
for
okay.
now.
For now.
Unless I find out that at some point you made a remark about the Scots.
I've never made a remark
right.
about the Scots. I love the Scots.
Yeah, but what did you call Frank O'Mara? He's Irish. You called him what did you call
O'Mara?
Who is this O'Mara? I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I can pronounce names very great. We all have
That's the
trouble with
British
that.
in you.
It's the British
Calling
in me.
an Irish guy O'Mara.
Hey, I just pronounced it.
Like some guy in a movie.
It's the British way of pronouncing it, Mike. Come
All
on.
right, whatever.
Come on, give me a little credit here. That's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.